Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Rough Cut on VCTV. I'm your host, Jennie Butler. Today I sit down with field sound mixer Emily Strong. Emily has been working as a sound mixer for years. She's worked on dozens of documentary projects, including the Taylor Swift documentary, Miss Americana. She's also worked on the New York Times docu-series, The Weekly. Most recently, she worked on Rudy Valdez's docu-series We Are the Brooklyn Saints, which debuted on Netflix in January. Emily and I talk about what makes good sound in a documentary, how first-time documentary filmmakers can achieve great sound on a very low budget, what they should be thinking about, and what she's learned over the years of being a field sound mixer. So it's a great conversation, very wide-ranging. If you're interested in sound, I think you'll get a lot out of it. So here it is. This is Emily Strong. You're watching Rough Cut on VCTV, and I hope you enjoy it. If you could just kind of start off by telling me like how you got into sound mixing.
I chose not to go back to school after I graduated, and I tried to get an internship at a production company in Chicago called Consortium Films. That's been around for I think 53 years this year. And I ended up moving to Chicago and trying to get that internship that I didn't get the first time, but had already moved here. And so I tried to keep on taking advantage of other resources that were around town, like all of the different documentary schools here. There's Medill at Northwestern, and then DePaul has a documentary program here, and then there's Columbia College, and then there's like a radio and TV program too up at Northwestern. So we used to just work for free on student films and with people that were going to school and in the documentary programs. And I just got really lucky and worked on a couple of student docs, and they needed someone to do sound, and people that were working on their films just were super generous in teaching me how to do it. And they were really passionate about it too in school. And so that just made me really interested and felt like it was like an exciting job to have. And then I ended up working first at the organization at Consortium in an organizational role, managing their emerging filmmaker programs. It was sort of the first real job, or one of the first jobs that I got in documentary film. And I continued to work on my own personal projects on the side, and I would run sound on those, and then on my friends' projects too. And I kept on, as I was working at the company, I just kept on, producing little projects on the side. And I just continued to kind of ask around for resources. There are a lot of amazing people around the documentary company in Chicago that I was working at that really were into kind of incubating and mentoring and supporting emerging filmmakers, and super generous with their skill sharing. And so it was pretty nice just to be able to have people that were really easily accessible to ask questions about sound as I was learning and as I was kind of working in a different area in documentary. And then I ended up deciding that I wanted to move to New York because I wanted to expand my skill sets and I wanted to kind of push myself. And I really was loving all of a lot of projects that I was seeing coming out of New York, and some of the companies that were there. I found what they did really exciting. And that's when I took a leap sort of away from an organizational role and into freelance location sound mixing.
Those student films that you worked on initially, were you doing sound for them, or did you just kind of discover the sound that you were interested in sound through working on their productions?
Those student films that I was working on, I sort of discovered sound through being able to have an opportunity to just, do anything on their films. And it turned out that there were often not sound people or people that were interested in sound. And so I sort of discovered it through volunteering to do anything that they needed, like PAing, and then they would a couple of them just needed sound people too, and then they just taught me how to use their equipment. Really simple things usually.
What was it about sound specifically that was interesting to you? I mean, you said you had some mentors that talked like really passionately about it. Like what did they say that really resonated with you?
For me, sound was really interesting because I've always just loved to listen to people's life experiences all my life. And I was originally interested in sociology or psychology, and I got my undergraduate degree in sociology and didn't know if I was going to go down a sociology route, more academic route, or maybe I was really interested in psychology too. And I just like to hear about people's lives and found it endlessly fascinating and a way that I felt really, I was empowered by other people's stories and their journeys, and just got a lot out of listening to people. And I just realized while I was sort of learning sound that was a way that I could do that professionally.
What are some of the challenges of capturing good sound in like a kind of unpredictable documentary environment where you're not necessarily in a studio?
Yeah, there are so many challenges trying to capture high quality sound in documentary. Just when it comes to timing is one thing, just, having to not knowing exactly what's going to happen next and kind of, going by the moment and needing to maybe like throw a mic on someone really quickly who's going to enter a scene and need to make sure it's perfect and it is capturing sound so that they can, not be interrupted in what they're actually doing and go continue on with whatever we're trying to capture while we're following them. So just being able to do those things really quickly is one challenge. Location is always a challenge if you're trying to get sit-down interviews, even if you're in, say, a studio or a place that's been rented out to do sit-down interviews. Sometimes there hasn't been like a location scout, or there maybe is a location scout that doesn't know the exact needs. And so if a sound person hasn't been able to scout themselves, then there might be some inopportune like noises, traffic. There's so many uncontrollable things unless you really are in like a real like legitimate sound studio, which a lot of the times documentaries aren't, because we want to have like we want to be in someone's life and maybe have a sit down interview in their home, where the goal might be to use that voiceover or use that interview for voiceover. So it needs to be really clean, but they might be, but then visually they want it, they might want to be in someone's home so it looks natural and so that the person that we're talking with feels comfortable. And it might just not be a perfect sound environment. So there are just things to work around with that. And there's lots of easy fixes for that, like on location, not easy fixes, but there are ways to sort of smooth out those situations. And sometimes it's a matter of being really brave and having an awesome producer that might go. I'm thinking about a recent interview that we were doing at an Airbnb, and someone started playing super loud music next door to us, and like right in the middle of the interview, and a really brave producer went next door, knocked on the door, and it turned out to be, it was like a Saturday. So someone was just like, doing their Saturday chores or something. And it was like an old man that couldn't really hear very well. And he was just vibing and blasting his music, which was amazing and great. But at the same time, it was really interfering. And they just went over and kind of talked to him and explained to him what we were doing, and asked that they turn down the music just for like an hour. And they were really kind and did that. But sometimes, it's trying to do everything that you can to make it a more ideal situation. And usually it just takes someone, communication and patience.
Yeah, I imagine location scouts, if you're like working on a high enough budget film that you have someone like a location scout, I can imagine that maybe they're not thinking about the sound I mean, maybe they're just like they're looking, oh, this visually looks good or this works or whatever. But
Mhm.
if they're not working in sound, maybe there's things that are sort of going over their head, like
Yeah,
what you just
definitely.
described. Yeah.
They're trying to do their job the best they can. I'm very sure of that, but there are just times when maybe the studio has been used for other things and maybe photo shoots or things that weren't just, hours of audio, and
Mhm.
they never had any issues with any of the productions that worked there before because they weren't just focused on like a sound thing, but sometimes we might go in and use it just solely for sit down interviews and it's really important that it's
Yeah.
like as clean of a signal as possible.
Can you talk about sound in documentaries and how that can change your film?
I think sound in documentaries can be really, really fascinating because you can catch certain things on audio, um, and in private or intimate conversations with people that you might not be able to catch with the whole team in a room. Um, there are people, if I think people forget that there might sometimes for good, I don't want them to be thinking about being mic'd, and being self-conscious, and might, let their guard down, and we might be able to catch something really, really sensitive or interesting or compelling when they have let their guard down and they don't maybe have a camera in their face at that moment, and maybe it's just audio. And I think that that's a really fascinating thing that can happen with audio, and an important thing about audio and documentary. And then I also think it's really interesting to catch other personality nuances too. When I'm listening to people, I just think it's interesting to listen to them talk to themselves and listen to the way that they breathe, and like when they're nervous about something, and just listen to those kinds of nuances and ways people communicate that you might not always catch just on video.
Are you in a dialogue, like a constant dialogue with the director when, like, let's say you pick up something with a mic and they were not paying attention and doing something else or whatever?
Yeah.
Are you telling them that day, like, hey, I heard this thing, so that they can sort of work off of that? Or are you just giving them the files and like waiting for them to see it in the edit?
That is one of my favorite things about collaborating on documentary teams, is being able to have those conversations, those side conversations, either at lunch or on a quick break, like in passing, knowing like what the director is looking for, and knowing what kind of moments feel really interesting or important, and being able to hear them, but no one else may have heard it because they might be in another room. And we might not be recording at that time, but I'm usually just always rolling just in case, because some of the most interesting moments are when the camera isn't rolling, because it again, people might let their guard down a bit, and might not be thinking about being filmed and being recorded, and they might say something that's really, I don't know, really interesting, and it's great to be able to tell a director, or share that with the director, and see if that's useful for them or not, and what their goals are for the character or for the project overall.
Mm.
And I also love having that collaboration factor with DPs as well. They're really busy looking, for their shots, and following the participants as well, and always looking through a lens. And I think it's really um, it's really a great thing to be able to hear something that's going on, and then being able to tell whatever partner I'm working with that this is happening,
Mm.
and that maybe we should like go like head towards this participant, or head this, they're gonna maybe leave the room and go have a different conversation, and that might be something that they wanted to get. I
Mm.
love those conversations. I think it's so much fun.
Wondering, like, if you ever think about or have conversations with the director about like the ethics of recording sound when someone maybe doesn't realize it, or it's a private conversation, or they forgot that the mic is on.
Mhm.
Conversations around that.
As far as directors and ethics go, I think a lot of the time it's more about recording everything, and then if the participant often, I mean, this does happen sometimes, says that they like don't put that in, and I always hear a director agree. I've never heard someone say like, no, we're going to put that in. Like if someone expresses that they really don't want something in, the people that I've worked with are really respectful and ethical about that. I think that might be more of a conversation after the film is cemented, and if a participant sees it and, before it goes to distribution or something like that, or, finalization, and maybe they want something out. I think that's like maybe a different conversation that they and the director have.
Yeah. You are also a film producer. Can you talk about your experiences like making your own films and how that's informed your sound mixing and vice versa?
I feel like producing my own short project. I've produced a couple of short documentary films, and that experience for me, and I've freelanced a bit and done a couple of projects for other people as well, or hired projects. And I feel like it just is a really great reminder for me on set just to always be giving it my all, because it's someone else's project, and a producer puts in so much work and so much effort organizing all of the pieces, and spinning so many plates. And I think if you have played any other role on set, other than like if you've played multiple roles on set, I think most people have an appreciation then for, other roles, because they know how the challenges of it, and want to for me, it just makes me want to do my very best on every single project that I work on, and with every person that I work on, because I know how important it is for me to have people that are really focused when they work, and how much better that makes a project. And so I try to be that way too.
If let's say you're talking to someone who wants to do a documentary, but they have a very limited budget, but they want great sound, what would you tell them to invest in?
I would definitely. I've had those conversations with people before, and I really love having those conversations because I care about their projects, and I do understand, as someone who's independently produced before, how difficult it is to raise funds. And I would like to know what the important, what they're trying to get out of it, and what events they're going to be filming, and what conversations they're going to be filming, and what interviews they're going to be filming, and try to advise them to, it's going to be different for each project, I think, but try to point out the important areas where they may really want to focus on getting a sound person for that day. And if they are going to run sound themselves, I guess having a really thorough conversation again, and trying to advise them as much as possible on what might be helpful on that particular day.
What sort of situations specifically do you feel like a sound person is really useful, and what kind of situations do you feel like could theoretically someone could run their own sound?
I feel like theoretically someone can run their own sound when they may have a really intimate relationship with a participant, or a group of participants in their project, and they're and just their presence alone is how they're getting all of the interesting material. For instance, in Minding the Gap, Bing Liu's film, he made, I would guess, about 75% of that film on his own, just with a shotgun mic on his whatever camera he was using at that time. And that was the way that he was able to, and that was when at the beginning he had no funding whatsoever. And that was the way that he was able to capture these intimate moments with friends, because there was no stranger in the room, no sound person, like sticking out with their boom mics and laving you to remind you that you're in a documentary. And so I think in those kinds of personal, intimate situations, it's really beneficial to maybe think about story first. Well, I think it's a lot of times beneficial to think about story first, and then doing the best you can technically with camera and with sound after. But I think story is number one all the time, really.
Mhm. Let's say you're giving advice to somebody who has unlimited funds
Oh.
for a documentary. Like, what would you say that they should invest in as far as sound goes?
That's a really good question. I think, again, it goes back to story.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter how much money you have, really. It's always nicer, and it will always be helpful to have more money. And everyone should continue funding documentaries and continue working hard at getting their documentaries funded fully, and to be able to, pay for their technicians and all of that. But I think I think story is the most important thing. And like the purpose of why someone's telling these stories and or sharing them. And so it just doesn't, I mean, I would say if they had unlimited money in the scenes or the moments or the events, would not be disturbed whatsoever by a sound person being there and being able to mic, like 20 people, or, and be able to be in every scene with a boom mic. If that was the case, then hire, the sound person that you think would be the best for for your project at those times, and pay them their full rate. But other than that, I don't think that there's any amount of money that can make a, great documentary if the story and the purpose and the meaning isn't, behind it.
What about environmental sound? Is that something that you're
Oh,
thinking about when are you capturing like a car going by, or like, are you thinking about the environment, and what advice would you give to someone who, like, this is their first documentary? Like, should they be thinking about that when they're out shooting, whether they have a sound person or not?
I'd say that environmental sound, first of all, is really, really fascinating and really beautiful. And if there's the time, I think it's definitely worth spending picking up, sounds of, children playing on, at recess, on a schoolyard, or traffic sounds, or birds chirping. I think those things, like birds chirping or any of those sounds, can be useful in transitions and helpful in post, for sure, if they're picked up on location, or even if they're used just for temp, for while an editor is piecing together the story. I guess I would say do it if there's time, for sure. I think it's definitely worth it. And a lot of the times in documentary, there just isn't time for that. So I do think that's one of the things that people leave for last. But I love when there is the opportunity to do that. It makes me so happy. It's just so much fun, just, picking up the nat sound in the areas that we're filming in. But I would say the times that I've actually been able to do that are slim to none. Like, with documentary, we're usually running, just running, gunning, and there hasn't been time fit into the schedule to do that. But
Mhm.
but also, on the same token, there is, if you have a down moment, you can do that. Like, if people are wrapping up, maybe, and you've heard like a lot of birds chirping, a couple blocks down, it's definitely worth, just running over real quick and trying to get that, or running over somewhere and trying to get, the sounds of like a loud, I don't know, like a loud kitchen or something, or sounds in a classroom of kids talking or something like that, just in case. And then just label everything and put it in your sound notes so that people know that it's there, and tell the director. Just, I think the communication, like letting them know that you did that, is really important too, if that hasn't been discussed previously. And I think it's always worth it if you can make the time to do it.
What would you say to someone who was like, well, I could just get those sounds from a sound library?
They can do that. And sometimes that might be the better sound, or the more appropriate sound to use. I just think the more you can gather and the
Mhm.
more options that you have, the better. And then I just do think about someone editing too, and they're not going to, they may not want to, spend time looking into different like sound effects and things, and they might just want to use your sound that you've already logged that's like right there in their files, and it might just make it easier and more streamlined for someone else in the process if you do it.
What advice would you give to someone who is interested in sound mixing specifically for documentaries and kind of wants to get into the field?
I feel like learning as much as you can from as many resources that are out there is really integral to my learning process. I just like to absorb as much as I can from books. I found this one sound book super helpful when it came to the actual action of sound mixing. It wasn't in a super technical book, but it's called The Production Sound Mixing, The Art and Craft of Sound Recording for the Moving Image by John Murphy. And it's not documentary specific, but it is more, he shares a lot of experiences of being on set, on documentaries and on fiction film. And all of it kind of applies to documentary and just general filmmaking. And he talks about the things that you can't, that are outside the technical realm that you just have to learn by doing it. And it was really good to kind of have those the heads up on like things that can go wrong or things to be prepared for before I really, or questions to ask or things to think about before I started working while I was, learning how to work as a sound person. There's also a really good podcast called the Location Sound Podcast that I find really helpful. It's all location sound mixers that are interviewed, and just hearing all of their different experiences is really valuable. So I would advise like someone to, just absorb as much as they can from all of these resources that are available, so that they can sort of help calibrate them. And the more information that you have, the more direction you'll have to, and you might be able to start thinking more about like exactly what type of documentaries do you want to work on, like what is important to you and what would you try to work on, that something, what are the things that you find really interesting and would maybe gravitate towards. And I think also there are other plates to spin aside from just the actual location sound mixing. Learning about that, I think there's value in learning about how to, if you're going to be a freelancer, there's a really great book called The Freelancer Manifesto by Joey Croneman, I think. I might have really messed up his last name, but I thought that was super beneficial to me as I was leaving an organizational job and stepping out into the world of freelance and trying to learn how to sustain myself as a filmmaker in that way. And I would suggest, for me, as I mentioned, I was really lucky to have a huge community of mentors in Chicago that were really accessible and gave a lot of their time talking, to me about their experience as freelancers or as location sound people. But there are amazing people everywhere that are like that are willing to share their time with you. And I would suggest reaching out to those people and trying to, especially now with Zoom, it's more convenient in some ways. No one has to go anywhere, but you can still have a really great conversation and listen to other people's experiences and ask questions that you have, and trying to gather those sort of resources too.
Yeah, and the Video Consortium is a great, I think, place to do that because there's
100%.
so many people who are willing to share their wisdom, especially with up and coming filmmakers and younger people. So yeah, such a great environment for that. And we will definitely link to everything you just mentioned in the show notes.